Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. It's your favorite history teacher back again with another historical video. Sorry about that. Today is our last lecture for World War One. So buckle up. It's a quick one. World War One was quick. Again, so much has happened in the last over 100 years that, is it really? So let's just get into it and get it over with. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I need a beverage. Okay, write this down while I take a sip of my coffee. All right, World War One ends. Chapter 9, Lesson 4. It's over as quick as it started. Not really though. That was your warm up. Objectives: we're going to understand the sequence of events during the last years of World War One and identify the relationships between Wilson's 14 points, the League of Nations, and the Treaty of Versailles, and the legacy of World War One. All right, 1917 sadness. So the year 1917, good movie, was not a good one for the Allies. The Allied defenses in the Western Front had been badly defeated. The Russian Revolution began in November 1917, led to Russia's withdrawal from the war. A few months later, on a positive side, the entry of the U.S. gave the Allies a much-needed psychological boost, along with fresh troops and supplies, as we talked about last time. For Germany, the withdrawal of the Russians offered new hope for a successful end to the war. Germany was then free to concentrate entirely on the Western Front once Russia was out. Erich Ludendorff, who guided military operations, decided to make one final military gamble: a grand offensive in the West. The German attack was launched March 1918. By April, German troops were within about 50 miles of Paris, but the German advance was stopped at the Second Battle of the Marne, July 18th. French, Moroccan, and American, 140,000 fresh American troops just arrived, supported by hundreds of tanks, pushed the Germans back over the Marne, and Ludendorff's gamble failed. With more than 1 million American troops pouring into France, the Allied forces began to advance towards Germany. On September 29th, 1918, General Ludendorff told Germany leaders that the war was lost. He demanded that the government ask for peace at once. Interesting how this book tells it. Where like we've been told that it wasn't really no real loser, no real winner, but we put the blame on someone. And now you got the personal leadership of the general saying the war is lost. That's General Ludendorff. This is the Marne offensive right over here. So remember, 3 miles of land, give or take. Remember all those deaths? Here's a picture painting. All right, Dunsky. So German officials soon found out that the Allies were unwilling to make peace with the autocratic imperial government of Germany. Reforms for a liberal government came too late for the tired, angry German people. On November 3rd, 1918, sailors from the northern German town of Kiel mutinied. Within days, councils of workers and soldiers formed throughout northern Germany and took over civilian and military offices. Emperor William II gave in to public pressure and left the country November 9th. After his departure, the Social Democrats under Friedrich Ebert announced the creation of a new democratic republic. 2 days later, November 11th, 1919, the new German government signed an armistice to end the fighting. Test question. The armistice ends the fighting. The treaty ends the war. So, armistice. The war was over, but the revolutionary forces that had set in motion in Germany were not yet exhausted. A group of radical socialists unhappy with the Social Democrats' moderate policies formed the German Communist Party. in December 1918, and a month later tried to seize power in Berlin. The new social democratic government, backed by regular army troops, crushed the rebels and murdered Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht. That's how the book says it pronounced. Leaders of the German communists. A similar attempt for a communist revolution in the city of Munich in southern Germany was also crushed, and the new German Republic saved. These attempts at a revolution left middle class with a deep fear of communism. Austria also experienced disintegration and revolution, as we talked about. As the empire grew war-weary, ethnic groups increasingly sought to achieve their independence. By the time World War I ended, the Austro-Hungarian Empire ceased to exist. The empire was replaced by the independent republics of Austria, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia, along with the large monarchical state called Yugoslavia. So that's who is that? That's Ludendorff. No, that's not Ludendorff. I forget who is this? It's not the Kaiser. Maybe that is Ludendorff. Who knows? Oh, that's Friedrich Ebert. Those are the communists. And that's Austria-Hungary. And that's Germany. So the old empires became new countries. All right, Wilson's idealism. So, January 1919, representatives of the 27 victorious Allied nations met in Paris to make a final settlement of World War I. Over the course of war, there were reasons for fighting the war had dramatically changed. When European nations went to fight in 1914, most only sought territorial gains, but by the beginning of 1918, they're also expressing more idealistic reasons for the war. No one expressed these idealistic reasons for war better than U.S. President Woodrow Wilson. Even before the end of the war, Wilson outlined, test question, the 14 points to the U.S. Congress, his basis for a peace settlement that he believed justified the enormous military struggle being waged. Wilson's proposals for a truly just and lasting peace included reaching the peace agreements openly rather than through secret diplomacy. His proposal also included reducing armaments, military forces, and weapons, and ensuring self-determination, the right of each people to have their own nation. Wilson portrayed World War I as a people's war against absolutism and militarism, the two enemies of liberty, he argued, could be eliminated by only creating democratic governments and a general association of nations. The association would guarantee political independence and territorial integrity to all states. Wilson will become the spokesperson for a new world order based on democracy and international cooperation. When he arrived in Europe for the peace conference, Wilson was cheered enthusiastically by many Europeans, but the president, who soon found out the more practical motives, guided other states. So that's Woodrow Wilson. Here's Woodrow. Can he produce the harmony, world peace symphony? Can he get everyone to play on key? All right, peace in Paris. So delegates met in Paris early 1919 to determine the peace settlement. Complications soon arose at the Paris Peace Conference. One thing was secret agreements that had been made before the war raised hopes of European nations for territorial gains, i.e. Italy. But these hopes conflicted with the principle of self-determination put forth by Wilson. National interests also complicated the deliberations of the Paris Peace Conference. David Lloyd George, Prime Minister of Great Britain, had won a decisive victory in elections December 1918, and his plan was simple: make the Germans pay for this dreadful war. France's approach to peace was chiefly guided by its desire for national security. George Clemenceau, the premier of France, felt that the German people had suffered the most from the German aggression. The French people had suffered the most from the German aggression, so the French desired security against future German attacks. So Clemenceau wanted Germany stripped of all weapons, vast German reparation payments to cover the cost of war, and a separate Rhineland as a buffer state between France and Germany. The most important decisions at the Paris Peace Conference were made by Wilson, Clemenceau, and Lloyd George, acting on behalf of the U.S., France, and Great Britain, called the Big Three. Germany was invited to attend, and Russia couldn't make it due to its civil war. There's David Lloyd George, George Clemenceau, the Big Three. Looks like the Monopoly guy. Disagreements. So, in the view of the conflicting demands that arose at the Paris Peace Conference, it was no surprise that the Big Three will quarrel. Wilson wanted to create a world organization, the League of Nations, to prevent future wars. Clemenceau and Lloyd George wanted to punish Germany. In the end, only compromise made it possible to achieve a peace settlement. Wilson's wish for the creation of an international peacekeeping organization to be the first order of business was granted. January 25th, 1919, the conference accepted this idea of the League of Nations. In return, Wilson agreed to make compromises on territorial arrangements among the countries. He did so because he believed the League of Nations could fix any unfair settlements. Clemenceau also compromised to obtain some guarantees to French security. He gave up France's wish for separate Rhineland and instead accepted a defensive alliance with Great Britain and the U.S. However, the U.S. Senate refused to ratify this agreement, which will weaken the Versailles peace settlement. League of Nations. League of Nations Bridge was designed by the President of the United States. Keystone. We are the stone to fill this void. And will we do it? The gap in between the bridge. Those are people. This is Henry Cabot Lodge. Talk about him in a bit. So the final peace agreement of Paris consisted of 5 separate treaties with the defeated nations of Germany, Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Turkey. That's 5. The Treaty of Versailles with Germany was by far the most important. The Germans considered this a harsh peace, but they were so especially unhappy with Article 231, the so-called War Guilt Clause test question, which declared Germany and Austria were responsible for starting the war. The treaty ordered Germany to pay reparations for all damages that Allied governments and their people had sustained as a result of war. The military and territorial provisions of the Treaty of Versailles also angered Germans. They had to reduce its army to 100,000 men, cut back its navy, as if it was good enough, eliminate its air force. Alsace and Lorraine were taken by the Germans from France in 1871. Franco-Prussian War were returned, and eastern portions of Germany were awarded to make a new Polish state. German land along the Rhine River became a demilitarized zone, stripped of all weapons and fortifications, as it was hoped to serve as a barrier for any future German moves against France. No matter how outraged the Germans were by this, quote, dictated peace, Germany still accepted it. So the Treaty of Versailles, all these 14 points that President Woodrow Wilson puts forth, treaties have to be in America, treaties have to be ratified by the U.S. government, meaning they agree to these terms. And the Treaty of Versailles, if the U.S. government had agreed to it, the Treaty of Versailles enabled the League of Nations to declare war. And if it was a war that the U.S. did not want to be a part of, it would supersede Congress and make the U.S. weak. In their eyes. I'm sure President Woodrow Wilson meant for peace to be happening with this organization, but U.S. government officials didn't see it that way, and they thought, Wilson was just trying to put forth his ideas because he's perfect. So that's why the U.S. doesn't ratify it. Even though the president was the main spokesperson, the big 3, he was a part of it. Yeah. So the U.S. government doesn't accept the treaty. There's the Treaty of Peace. Here's Germany, and it gets taken away. Alsace and Lorraine is over here. All right, determination. So the Treaty of Versailles and the separate treaties made with the other Central Powers redrew the map of Eastern Europe. Many of these changes occurred by the end of the war, as German and Russian empires lost much of their territory in Eastern Europe, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire disappeared. New nation states emerged from these 3 lands. 3 empires: Finland, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Austria, and Hungary. New territorial arrangements were made in the Balkans. Romania added new lands. Serbia formed the nucleus of a new state, Yugoslavia, which included Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. The principle of self-determination supposedly guided the Paris Peace Conference, but the mixtures of people in Eastern Europe made it impossible to draw boundaries strictly across ethnic lines. As a result of compromises, almost every European state was left with ethnic minorities. Some states would begin population transfers where ethnic minorities were forced to leave their countries in which they lived and to settle in new states where they're among the majority. The problem of ethnic minorities within nations would lead to many conflicts later. Yet another centuries-old empire the Ottoman Empire was broken up by the peace settlement to gain Arab support against the Ottoman Turks during the war. Western allies promised to recognize the independence of Arab states in the Ottoman Empire. When the World War I was over, Western nations changed their minds. France controlled the territory of Syria. Britain controlled the territories of Iraq and Palestine. In addition to these territories, Great Britain, France, Belgium, and Japan were given governing control over Germany's various colonies in Africa and the Pacific. These acquisitions were called mandates. Woodrow Wilson opposed the outright annexation of colonial territories by the Allies. As a result, in the mandate system, a nation officially governed a territory on a temporary basis as a mandate on behalf of the League of Nations, but it did not own that territory. But you can bet your bottom dollar they took all the natural resources they could from that area. So this is Russia that was made. These are the lands that they lost. 1916, 1923 in orange, light orange is what they lost. Turkey. So Armenia. Just Armenia. But see, it was already falling apart before in this area. Here are mandates. Japanese mandate. Arabia. Mandate. All that stuff. Aftermath. So World War I shattered the liberal, rational society that existed in Europe at that time. The deaths of about 16 million people, as well as the incredible destruction of the war, undermined the whole idea of progress. Veterans came home injured mentally and physically. These men, along with millions who did not return, served as a constant reminder of the horrors of modern warfare. Entire populations have participated in a devastating war. World War I was a total war, one that involved complete mobilization of resources and people. The result was power of governments over the lives of their citizens increased. Freedom of the press and speech were limited in the name of natural security. I think that's national. World War I made a practice of strong central authority a way of life. The turmoil created by the war also seemed to open the door to even greater insecurity. Combat in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Middle East left marks on these societies that were felt long after the fighting ended. Revolutions broke up old empires and created new states, which led to new problems. And the hope that Europe and the rest of the world will return to normalcy was soon dashed. Okay, that's going to conclude that PowerPoint. Hopefully, I know I started talking soon before the bell started to ring, but you know, needs must. I tried to finish, but alas, I mean, it's still a pretty quick video, under 20 minutes maybe. So yeah, that's World War I quickly, without problem. So I'm gonna do my outro. Okay, your homework is page 355, 2 through 4. Page 355, 2 through 4. So hopefully you guys did enjoy that. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.